Welcome to Earth, a Love Story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter. This week on the podcast is a really long solo episode where I'm going to talk about a bunch of very touchy, delicate, complex, nuanced stuff. Stuff that requires me to be slow and thoughtful and also step off some edges that I've stayed away from for a while. And I promise you, throughout the entire process of working this episode together, I was like, why the fuck am I doing this? Why am I talking about this stuff? But it wouldn't go away. And every time I tried to put it down, someone would randomly send me a message telling me that they had been thinking about this exact subject and giving me these beautiful insights that I could add in. And after all of that, there was just no way that I could turn away from it. So I will try to deliver all of this as skillfully as possible. And as it is with all of my work, please, for the love of God, do not listen to anything that I say unless it rings in your bones. And even then, check in with yourself. There are something like 8 billion people on the planet, and therefore something like 8 billion different realities co-creating our real flesh and blood and suffering and joy collective reality. And for each of those people, their realities are real, even if they're in direct contradiction to the facts of our own realities. And as the world moves more into the digital realms and things like deepfakes and many thousands of siloed online communities who are shouting into their own echo chambers become not just the norm, but actually new real realities themselves, we're faced with a really big question of how to know what exactly is real and what to do about it. So taking seriously and holding lightly our own centers, our own experiences, our own very real realities becomes ever more vital in general and vital for listening well to this episode in particular. The topics that I'm going to explore today can be really triggering. They're not as triggering to me now as they've been in the past, but I do remember times in the past where I was still trying to make sense of what reality was, and I found this stuff incredibly difficult to engage with. So if you're teetering on the edge of some void, like what the fuck actually is reality, then just maybe don't listen today or ever. Take care of yourself and your nervous system first and foremost, always. I'm always going to align with the body. All right. A few housekeeping things. So there's this really serious topic happening, but I also have other topics percolating. The second episode of Sex, Love, and Other Drugs is longing to be spoken into the world. And that's going to be pretty fun, I think, because I'm going to take everything I said in that episode and soften it and flip it and decondition my own judgment of myself and my soft, gooey center and decide to see it all as a superpower instead of a liability. So stay tuned. Also, I have episodes coming to the surface about money and manifestation and what the fuck all that's about, along with why I think the goddess is an essential part of the UFO UAP conversation and more. I'm kind of on fire right now. I've got so many ideas coming in and so many things that I really want to talk about emerging. So the next few months, hopefully will be a lot of fun and horrible, right? Like these topics are tough and rich. Also, I should say, because I always forget, for my brand new listeners, hello, hi. I read my entire book at the beginning of this podcast, so you can access that, which is basically a free audiobook, by starting with the first episode, which is preface. And also, heads up to everyone, at some point I'm going to be turning those episodes into an actual audiobook, and I'm going to put them behind a paywall. That's for the Earth, a Love Story audiobook, because a girl's got to eat. And they'll always be available to patrons and to the experiencer group. And if you really can't afford the $15 or whatever it will be, just contact me and I'll send you the whole thing for no charge. But for right now, it's still there, it's still free. So if you love it and want to listen again or want to share it with someone before it goes behind a paywall, now's the time. I'm pretty sure when my second book is done, I will also put it out for free on the podcast like I did with Earth, a Love Story. So you can look forward to that as well if I ever finish my second book. I will. It's coming. And one last thing before we jump in. concerning the official registration for the Bridge Collective Group Teachings, which is coming very soon. And there's still time to get on the waiting list. There's a couple weeks that are available to get on the waiting list so that you can take advantage of early bird pricing. And if you sign up to be on the waiting list, there's no cost, no obligation. Maybe we don't even know what the Bridge Collective quite is yet. I hear you. I'll have all the details and dates and such things clearly expressed by the time I ask you to sign up and put your money down. And that way you can make sure it's what you want to focus on and learn, and also that it works with your schedule and all that good stuff. So again, juicy details coming soon, but if it calls to you at all, get on the waiting list if you're interested, so that I can send all of that to you along with the discount code for the course. And the way to get on the waiting list is to go to my website, honeyheart.org, and navigate to services and then to course. And you'll see a link that you can click on, or sign up for my newsletter, and I'll send the link that way as well. All right, that's it. That's all the housekeeping and prep done for this episode. So I will jump right in. I've been thinking a lot lately about influence. And I know that you all know that I'm not an expert in any of this, but I have deeply resonant ideas and enough information to just be slightly dangerous. And mostly I'm just reporting through my particular lens of reality. So take all of this with a grain of salt. So influence. There are so many ways that we're influenced all the time. You know, you can take advertising, for example. That's a very easy one. We all know that we're constantly influenced by advertising. Just walking through the grocery store and seeing the bright colors and knowing that even the shape and proportion of the cereal boxes was chosen because it's pleasing to the human eye. It's the golden ratio. I don't know if you knew that, but like credit cards, cigarettes, cereal boxes are made in the golden ratio because we deep in our deep down primordial bones are attracted to that, and they figured that out and use it for advertising. And it happens everywhere all the time. We're inundated by it constantly. We can't help but be influenced by that. We're influenced by memes. That's how we influence ourselves as a collective. And I don't know if you know this, but a meme, like as it is now, of course, it's a picture with some words. The first time the word meme was introduced into the culture was from a book that Richard Dawkins wrote in 1976. And he was talking about the meme as an idea or behavior or style that spreads by means of imitation from person to person within a culture and often contains symbolic meaning representing a particular phenomenon or theme. And eventually we found this great meme delivery system, which is the internet. And we've been going strong ever since. And these things do influence us. We can watch these ideas move through culture. It's not good or bad, but it's definitely happening. We influence each other all the time. In many ways, we're designed to influence and be influenced. Sometimes I feel more like an antenna than anything. My body is tuned to be in relationship. My body is tuned to go into trance with other humans. And I could never say all of this as good as Joshua Schrey on the Emerald podcast said it. He did an episode called How Trance States Shape the World, and I'll link to that in the show notes. And honestly, if you have not listened to that podcast, just go listen to every single episode of the Emerald podcast. It's amazing. Bottom line is that we're designed to be influenced. We're part animal, and our animal bodies want to be social and safe and in communion with each other. We long for it and look for it. And we've created an almost perfect simulacrum of it through the medium of our screens. My throat will close watching an emotional experience play out in a movie. I know I'm not the only one. Like a fucking Hallmark commercial can do it, if those still exist. I don't know. We pulse and shake our bodies in rhythm with the rhythms coming through our speakers. And we feel that deep connection that only music can bring. And part of our body is looking around for other humans to experience it with. We go into trances looking at our phones and watching TV and movies, and our brains and bodies are longing for connection to each other. So much so that we'll watch other people do silly dances or read poetry or cook or do little flirty videos or whatever our own individual algorithm is bringing us based on where we put our attention. And now you know where I put my attention. These spaces are reflections of reality, actually, and how reality works in many ways. They respond to where we place our attention and the quality of our attention, as the 4 Who Are One told me when they showed me the honeycomb matrix. It is a simulacrum of reality and how reality works. And TV shows and movies are not any different. Like, give me Sense8 or The Matrix, or really just about anything from the Wachowskis. Or have you guys seen that totally underrated and underknown movie called Midnight Special with Michael Shannon and the kid? And the ending of that movie makes me sob uncontrollably every time I've seen it, and I've seen it multiple times, just to have that feeling in my body, that feeling of connection. It's not good or bad. Again, I'm going to say it over and over. It's actually a neutral thing. My body is an animal body that's reaching out with hands and arms and eyes and a heart and other ineffable, invisible things for connection, for communion, for that feeling of belonging. And these things, the internet and social media and movies and TVs, are not inherently bad. They just aren't. But they are designed 100%, no doubt about it, to capture and hold our attention. That's what they are there for. We as humans have figured out how to hack our own dopamine systems. And we all know that hollow-eyed, dried-out feeling of our dopamine receptors being utterly fucked. And so then new memes begin to move through the culture in response to our realizing that we're fucked. And then what's happening now, and has been for the past few years, is that we try to hack our way back to life. So we all start taking cold showers and fasting and being outside early in the morning to get sun on our faces. And we're trying to find ways to restore some of that feeling of being alive and happy. And none of those things are bad either, but they're also influencing us. You know, I went through a big phase of like trying to hack my nervous system, trying to hack my dopamine system back into working. And it didn't work because I was ignoring the core emotional body and the need for real connection. So go take a cold shower. Great. Yes, it does have a major impact. But then if I just sat on my phone for the rest of the fucking day, it didn't really do much, you know? So all these things are influencing us, and it's just literally who we are. And the question is like, what do we do about it? And I'm going to answer that question. And I think it has something to do with evolution through joy. But I will come back to that later because I have an annoyingly long list of other things to talk about. For example, this is where it gets even like trickier and darker, and why I don't want to talk about any of this at all. But here we are. I cannot talk about influence without talking about conspiracy theory. I know. I'm nervous too. Don't worry. We're going to get through this together. I'm going to land it really softly. So hang in there. So the reason that I'm even able to approach these ideas that are so difficult for me right now and difficult to talk about and require so much nuance is that the particular like UAP, UFO experiencer crowd that I found myself in when I discovered that all of this stuff existed in 2019, I feel like I just accidentally stumbled into kind of the highest conversation that was being had in this area, that was taking this really broad picture into account, and that required a holding of paradox and encouraged us to not collapse the narrative into either or certainties. And having that foundation, having that understanding, and like being able to start to do that, to hold paradox and not collapse the narrative, helped me to re-engage with the things that I had just shoved away, that I was kind of terrified of and allergic to from, like the mid 2000s, which was basically Facebook spirituality, love and light, new age, spiritual bypassing, that kind of thing. So you've heard me talk about this before. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about it forever. I'm still deconditioning from it. Less these days, but it's still a thing. So I was able to re-engage with these ideas that for my own sanity, I had to shove aside. But now I could approach them in a more mature and discerning way and rely on my own experiences. And I understood that if I was going to collapse the narrative, it was because I'm choosing to collapse the narrative. And I also understood that it didn't make it any more or less real than anyone else's narrative or reality. Why do I think that there are like 8-something billion realities simultaneously playing out on the planet? Because some people hate cilantro and some don't. And some people think Sense8 was the best TV series ever written, and other people think it's heretical filth. And they're wrong, of course, but you get it. I could go on. Reality is definitely real. Like, I'm pretty sure there's a there, and that there is cilantro and Sense8. Those are completely neutral things. They're a pure reality, and we put our own ideas and labels and descriptions and categories on top of those things. And there are lots of spiritual lineages that talk about this. And in fact, like, fucking, that's what Spacebook spirituality was trying to say to me all those years ago. It excluded the body and the nervous system and the inner child and suffering, and refused to have any part of the conversation talk about the injustice and wars and genocides and other horrific things that are definitely happening. It just tried to simplify it into think happy thoughts and good things will happen to you. And if they don't, it's because you're fearful or negative or not thinking happy enough thoughts. But now I can come back to these ideas of reality and spirituality with the grounded in my body perspective. I can hold paradox. I can choose for myself how to see something. And I know that if I try to blow past my own grief or rage or fear or whatever, it simply isn't effective. I am having an experience of engaging with these things in a new way. And that includes conspiracy theory. Jesus, it's very edgy for me to talk about this. It just requires so much nuance and care. I'm doing my best. So you guys remember Y2K, right? Remember that? We thought the world was going to end. Like, we really did. There was a bunch of us who really did. I did. That was happening in my running and numbing phase of life. And I was living in Seattle, deeply suffering and unskillfully working my way through the world, smoking, drinking a lot, hiding. I think I was actually in the stairwell of my building in Seattle, where my poor little hermit projector self, that's a human design reference there, was sharing a studio apartment with this woman that I was in love with, who did not reciprocate. And I was in the stairwell suffering and running from that reality when the clock rolled over to the new year. And lo and behold, like, planes didn't fall out of the sky. The system didn't crash. Instead, nothing happened at all. Nothing to dampen my own suffering. The world didn't end. My world did not end. I just sat there with all of my problems still in my lap. And the same with 2012. We all thought it was over then, or that we'd all ascend away into the sky in our light bodies and disappear like the people in the Celestine prophecy books that we'd read. Is that just me? There were these moments that happened, and over, and from then on, it seemed like there was a new date every few months or maybe even years, when the poles were going to flip, or California was going to fall into the ocean, or the beings would descend and take us with them. And we believed it. I believed it. I went through so many crescendos of fear and anticipation, and then the anticlimax of being left in the world as it was, with all of my problems intact. And like full compassion, because it makes sense that we would believe these things. It makes sense that I would believe them for a few reasons. First, like, the beings that had been interacting with me since childhood had been telling me since I was 4 years old that the world was fucking ending and I needed to do something about it. They were like, look what you're doing to this paradise planet. Do something. And I was like, I don't even have a grasp on reality yet. But they kept coming back and kept telling me and kept showing me these cataclysmic images and kept pressuring me to do something about it. And that has stayed with me my whole life. I had one of those dreams a few weeks ago. It's constant. So yeah, like it makes sense that when something in the external told me that the end was coming, that I would believe it. Like it makes total sense. And number 2, like look around. The world is bananas. It's a lot. It's amazing. There's a lot of good things going on, but we don't really see that. We get to see news from around the world and in our local hometowns in a 24/7 stream if we want to. And they aren't reporting on the small, soft, beautiful, loving miracles that are happening every day. And it's rough out there, and they're showing us that. Why aren't they reporting on the soft, small miracles? Because fear is a powerful motivator in our animal bodies. And even if there isn't a coordinated, nefarious, or just practical effort to manipulate and control the masses with fear, which for me, sorry, like I know how I sound, but jury's out. I'm not convinced that's not happening. But regardless, the bottom, it could just be the corporations. Like the bottom line is that fear sells. Fear and sex. And combine them and you can sell almost anything. And we see it around us all the time. Okay. Are you guys hanging in there? We can do this. I'm going to get this episode out and then it's going to lay the groundwork that needs to be laid so that I can talk about these things without having to go into this much depth and nuance every single time. Like this needs to be done, but I'm doing this once. Like this is a lot for me. So, okay, we're going to get through it together. All right. Number 3, why it makes sense that we would believe these things, that we believe conspiracy, all of those things, right? Many of these events, like eclipses, the Mayan calendar, Lion's Gate, 11/11/11. Do you remember where you were on that day? And on, like they do carry a particular resonant frequency. Even if it's something that was created by us from the mimetic world, we brought it to life. We give it juice and power because so many of us point our attention at it. And the natural events like eclipses, they do have a very real effect, their own powerful natural frequencies. And so we know in our bones and also in our own deep, subtle bodies that something is going on here. And if we're collectively running on fear, we might perceive it that the end is nigh, right? And again, maybe it fucking is. I don't know. That's what they keep telling me. But I'm actually an eternal optimist. I'm very optimistic. So that's my constant disclaimer. All right. Number 4, we believe it because we collectively, genetically remember. We remember the times that we have fallen before. We remember the civilization collapses that have happened over and over. We remember them through the mechanism of our physical bodies, creating new physical bodies and passing those memories through those physical bodies. And we also remember them through our long selves, our soul selves, the selves that have been here before. Perdita Finn talked about that in our episode. I'll link that in the show notes as well if I remember. If you haven't listened, it's brilliant. So check that out. She talks about this. Bottom line, we believe it because we remember. We remember the Great Fall, capital G, capital F, like the Great Fall. And those lines from Yeats' poem, The Second Coming, float into our brains and we don't even know why. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know. that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Fuck, I'm sorry. I had to read that to you because I can't hold all this stuff by myself. And tell me that you don't shiver when you hear that. And tell me you don't understand why millions of people think Armageddon is upon us. Okay, but stay with me, my friends. Remember my eternal optimism that I will not leave us in the dark, watching the rough beast slouching. So I remember the Great Fall because of what that poem represents, deeply embedded in our collective psyches. And I also remember because of another Great Fall that happened. I remember because of Atlantis and Lemuria. I have close friends who have memories of Atlantis, regular dreams of Atlantis, and I have my own memories and dreams of Lemuria. And I remember that cataclysm that came and split the world, the very fabric of reality riven by some technology that shouldn't have been turned on, much less deployed. I remember that shock to my soul as a billion heartbeats fell silent. It's what brought me here. It's what brought me back to the planet at this time of great danger and great opportunity to try to do something useful. That's the story that I tell myself anyway, based on my own experiences, and it's a good and functional one. It's as true as cilantro being good or bad, right? It's a functional story that works for me. And finally, 5. The very big reason that I believe we are drawn to and believe conspiracy theories is that actually doing that, believing conspiracy theories, is part of the awakening process. When we discover that reality isn't what we thought it was because Congress is saying UAPs are real and that we have crash retrievals in bodies, or when we find out the things that our very own government have done to its very own people, or when we have a life-altering mystical experience with zero integration, with no grounding and no culture except for Facebook and Instagram love and light spirituality to help us make sense of these things in a grounded way, we can very easily spin right off. And no shade, love and light people, I'm calling out the systems, not the humans. So part of awakening to the idea that reality is not what we thought it was is that we go through a deconditioning process from the overculture of the world. And I know also from personal experience that that is a very weird and dangerous time. You know, deconditioning, like pulling back from what reality is supposed to be, what we're told is real, and finding ourselves in this very confusing, kind of empty, liminal space that's full of potentiality. And add into that we're tuned for this connection. We're constantly seeking to be influenced, to be in communion with others, to find safety in ideas and ideologies. And plus, it's like really fucking appealing to think that we know some secret that no one else knows, that we have the secret answer and everyone else is asleep. And I reject that. We are not stupid. We are influenceable, every single one of us. I'm totally fascinated with this thing that's happening in the overlap of the far right and Gnostic ideologies. I mean, these are echo chambers that don't hear anything but what's in, just like that's what an echo chamber is. But Gnosticism is basically saying, like, look, even God can't be trusted. Even God isn't the real God. And then take that idea and insert government for God or the media for God or whatever authority figure is currently in power for God. And again, Gnosticism, like my understanding of it, one of the aspects of it is that we're trapped. It's like a prison planet and we're trapped. And so it makes sense to me that people are drawn to these ideas, particularly if they feel powerless. And it makes sense to me that it is part of the awakening process. It was definitely a part of mine. My reality started to shake apart, I shit you not, when someone whispered to me in a bar that in like 2002, I think, that 9/11 was an inside job. And then I think they actually gave me a VCR. Do you guys know what that is? But they gave me like a videotape of a dude explaining why it was an inside job. And I'm pretty sure that there was like a folded up dollar bill and something about the eye and the pyramid. And it was like really terrible production value. And I felt like I'd stumbled onto this totally dark truth, this really wild secret. And it was alluring because it became easier to believe those things rather than face the things that were making my life harder than it had to be. It was easier to believe that this system was rigged than it was to come into alignment with my own personal responsibility. There was no balance, no discernment, no grounding, just this cultural meme working its way through my very activated nervous system. And like, once again, here's the nuance. Yeah, the system is fucking rigged. You know, that's why this stuff is hard. There's like truth braided in with fiction or with unhelpful, unfunctional realities. So eventually for me, thank goodness, like this is what happens as we continue on our journey as well. And, you know, I'm not calling anybody out who's deeply believes these things, but my perception of this is that we eventually get to a point where we just stop looking at that stuff. Because every time I did, I was agreeing that I was a victim of something, that there was this slippery secret force out there that was more powerful than me, lurking in the shadows, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I couldn't prove it or disprove it. And there were so many rounds of these things. And at the same time, the beings were telling me similar things. They were like, it's coming, do something. The world's in danger, you have to help. It's really fucking urgent. Get ready, get ready. And it just is crazy making. It makes you crazy. It can really fuck with your head. And some things I could know the capital T truth about, certainly, but there was a lot that I never would. And I had to decide what I was going to do with that, who I was going to be, and like what I could affect. What was my sphere of influence? What do I want to be influenced by so that I'm more helpful rather than harmful or a drain or just running myself in exhausted circles with this shit. So again, I'm not saying that some conspiracies aren't real. They don't exist. They do. There's some things that sound totally like a conspiracy, but are absolutely provable. And my plan for this podcast was that I was going to list a whole bunch of those. But I was like, why do that to our nervous systems? No, thank you. I mean, there are rabbit holes beyond rabbit holes if you look into this stuff, and we've all done it. And if you haven't and you want to look, like, just proceed with incredible caution, especially with today's internet, which is crazy by a factor of at least like 100 compared to the 2001 internet. All of this to say that this is an invitation to look at the folks who are currently going through the conspiracy part of the awakening process. The people, for example, that deeply believed that the world was going to end and planes would fall out of the sky on April 8th, just fucking last week. We can look at them with compassion because it's confusing. Reality is both real and not real. And we've been there ourselves. And it's not true that something is coming. Like, cataclysm is real and possible every day. I mean, look at what could potentially unfold in the United States. Whether it's social or political upheaval, or whether there's something that will happen from the earth herself, we can feel it, right? This is part of the very difficult aspect of this. This isn't all in our imagination. It's not all constructed. And here's the hope, right? There's all the more reason to claim our attention and point it towards something fucking meaningful. Expressing each of our particular gifts and strengths so that we can show up and play out our soul blueprint to the best of our abilities. And even if there's a softer landing coming, a softer transition into something new on the planet, which is what I pray for, isn't that what we all want deep down anyway, to express our gifts and strengths and gentle power and that primordial birthright, which is our human creativity, so that we can both receive and give love and support and guidance and joy and connection, all the good things. That's what we want anyway. Okay. We're getting close. I also want to talk about a couple of the less overt, less obvious forms of influence. Again, like advertising or like the very real disinformation campaigns that still affect experiencers to this day because of social stigma that was engineered. This is not a conspiracy. And there are even darker ideas about subtly keeping control of a huge population by giving us the perception of freedom and choice while actually deftly manipulating us to think that those choices were our ideas in the first place. If you have a very discerning mind and can pay less attention to the moon stuff, because I don't fucking know if that's real. I don't know. I don't know how to know. I guess I could go do the research. If you want to go do the research. Let me know what you find out. But if you can pay less attention to that stuff and more attention to Ingo Swann's treatment of these more subtle controls by both deep government agencies and ETs, by the way, read the book Penetration. Or watch my hands down favorite Star Wars series ever, Andor. It's so fucking good. And you can see the making of a revolutionary as it dawns on him what's actually going on and how his reality is deliberately constructed in relation to and by the Empire. If you watch that and you love it, please tell me. It's my favorite ever. I've seen it twice. I'm going to watch it again. I can feel it working on me while I watch it. It's really beautiful. Okay, that's it. That's as dark and deep as I want to get with this stuff. Because whether it's literally all true or not, or somewhere in between, the remedy is the same. And the remedy is a spiritual one. It's a remedy of consciousness, of knowing and exploring who we are so deeply that we ultimately see that we are all actually one thing. That when one person suffers, we all suffer. That no one is free until everyone is free. And that includes any beings that are consciously trying to exert influence in a negative, manipulated way for their own gain. And can you imagine anyway what that does to a person's karma? We've all manipulated one another in some way for our own gain. So it's less a matter of like good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil, and more a degree of levels of consciousness and unconsciousness. Levels of believing that we are separate and that this is actually a zero-sum game. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a non-zero-sum game. That's what the four who are one told me as well. And I don't talk about that much because it's just one more aspect that I have to try to figure out and put into words, but that's what they're talking about. Like, life is not a zero-sum game, it's a non-zero-sum game. We're just, bottom line, we're really looking at ourselves. All of this that we're seeing in the external world, we're looking at ourselves. And so finding an external enemy, which is a phrase that I got from Jessa Reed, who talks about all of this same kind of stuff really brilliantly. Like, if you don't know her and you like people who say fuck a lot and are pretty funny and talk about this stuff, she's great. Her podcast Soberish is really good. But yeah, when we decide to start looking for an external enemy to blame everything on, we become very disempowered. And also sometimes there's an external enemy. Like, victimization happens, you know, this takes so much nuance, so much paradox, so much space holding, so much being able to find ground in the liminality. But I believe in us, like, we can do this. I know the people that listen to this podcast, like, you guys blow my fucking mind on the regular. You're so smart and so wise, and you tell me these things, and I'm just so informed all the time. So I know that I'm talking to people who understand what the fuck I'm talking about and who have the ability to hold that nuance and complexity and all of that. And I'm so grateful. Okay, so the remedy, this remedy that I believe exists, this consciousness remedy, this spiritual remedy, includes wildly radical personal responsibility, wildly radical compassion. It includes clawing our attention and minds and bodies and nervous systems back from the screens that have been perfectly designed to capture our attention. It's about seeing multiple perspectives, including the fact that technology is actually neutral. And what we make of that will determine our future. And this is more true than ever, considering the emergence of AI. Like, don't even get me started there. It also includes remembering who we are as a species and that we are extraordinarily powerful. Our humanness does not have to be our liability. We can develop ourselves into mature, safe, loving, kind, discerning, wise beings and decide to point our wildly powerful attention at the things that we want to see grow in the world, the things that we want to see grow in the world. We can each of us claim our humanity. We can carefully attune to our own experiences as we deconstruct from the overculture's view of the world. And we might find, like many of us have, that we can really and truly see through time, that we can fly out of our bodies, that we can dream travel to war-torn areas and actually help people. How many people have that experience? I can feel you all raising your hands. We can visit our past and future selves and offer support and wisdom and encouragement. Or we can simply smile, simply care about each other, simply know and believe that that does have an impact. We can remember that the most powerful thing that we do, no matter what, exists beneath the umbrella of loving compassion in action. And I think that in order to do this, in order to implement this remedy, it requires being really mindful of what we expose ourselves to. Is it actually helpful to explore these rabbit holes? Or is it more helpful to get up and go do the dishes and go for a walk? Center the body, center the physical self, center the nervous system, the inner child. Resource ourselves so that we can be effective helpers for our close circle that we can influence. Choose what we want to influence us. And it's hard. I'm addicted to my fucking phone. It's getting better, a lot better, but it's hard. And for me, all of this is a journey of finding balance and ultimately leaning into my own lived experience in my body rather than whatever disturbing thing I could ingest from the multiplicity of realities and perspectives that are available to us at all times. While we're taking in those multiple realities and perspectives and we're getting ads for things that we only thought about, never said out loud, we are giving away our mindfulness. We're giving away our attention. So let's take it back. Where are we going to point our very valuable, very powerful attention? How are we literally spending the currency that is our attention? And I'm not talking about being naive to what's going on in the world at all. I'm deeply familiar with the gateways of grief that are calling us right now. From all over the planet, all over the world, from every fucking suffering person on this planet. And still, I promise you, I'm fucking hopeful. I believe in us. All right. One more, I'm going to share one more thing and then I'm going to wrap this up. So I wrote about trance and influence a couple years back when I was just beginning to explore this stuff. And I want to leave you with what I wrote. I have been thinking lately about what it means to be entranced, to be hypnotized, to be enchanted. I've been thinking about how for most of our long history as humans on this planet, the state of trance was sacred. Trance was entered into consciously, on purpose, likely with equal parts fear and desire, trepidation and hunger, because we knew the power it held. We entered into trance in community, with a wise woman or a shaman or with our peers, the men and the women or with the entire village. We entered into trance with dance or drumming or plants or hunting or weaving or humming. We knew the drums or the dance or the hunt could drive us into a frenzy or deep into the underworld. We approached the mystery and it was dangerous, wild, mystical, alive. And we are entranced now too. We are entranced with Instagram and Netflix and advertisements and podcasts and shows and our phones. We are entranced by memes and ideas, thought forms, the egregores that we accidentally created, accidentally worshiping hollow gods. What to do? Our brains are wired for trance. Our brains are exhausted from being in a constant state of tracking, scanning, analyzing, sniffing for danger, looking for a tiger that never comes. There is no tiger. And also we can feel that something isn't right. We feel the planet burning, we feel war and injustice and children suffering, and we feel, even if we can't name it, that we're supposed to be deeply connected to it all. But how? How can we bear it? So of course we entrance ourselves. Of course we find an ideology or a show or a podcast or a screen to turn our attention to. We don't know what else to do. We need trance. We long for it. We evolved to feel the day that the seasons change and to smell on the wind a bear on the ridge. We evolved to experience the forest and the ocean and the mountains and each other as wild, ecstatic, overwhelming mysteries. We needed to know where we were in relation to it all. Our bodies are thirsty to attune. Where to turn when the world around us is only dead materialism, reductionist, dry, hollow consumerism. Where can we quench our thirst? I recently experienced being in a circle of women. We were chanting and dancing, drumming and sobbing, laughing and touching. I found myself enchanted, entranced. And when I woke from the trance, I was on my knees, and there was a woman to my right and my left, and my arms were around their shoulders, and their arms were around mine and around the women next to them, and we were a holy circle of 10. On my knees in this circle, the wild cries and dances now complete. It was still, quiet. It was all bright eyes and parted lips and the thin sheen of sweat and our chests and breath rising and falling in unison. The air was thick with us. A mist hung among us and we breathed it in through our skin, alive, caught in the mystery of the trance we'd been in. Something inside of me was deeply healed. Francis Weller says that there are 5 gateways of grief, and one of them is the thing I expected and did not receive. My skin grieves for the village I did not receive. My heart longs for the trance that comes with ritual and drumming and dance. My eyes are hungry for unmasked faces. My body longs for people and spaces and places to contain my unfettered grief and my ecstasy. I am hypnotized by the world. I can't help it. I'm human. But I can choose what I will let entrance me. Not technology and media so good at giving us just the right hit so we keep coming back. Not dehumanizing ideologies that separate us from ourselves. Not endless lines of endless things to buy. I don't want to be hypnotized by the parched, barren world. I want to be entranced by poets and artists. I want to be entranced by the wind in the grass. I want to lose myself for half a day writing this essay. I want to watch a ladybug make its way through the constellation of freckles on my arm. I want to listen to a woman speaking wisdom, lulling me into finding my own conviction. I want to be enchanted by distant thunder and by my dreams and by people I love and who love me. I want to awaken, alive, panting on my knees. I want to be hypnotized by the hum of bees. Oh, God, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Morgan Jenks for our beautiful musical soundscapes. And don't miss the next episode because I interviewed this really brilliant and totally endearing guy named Mark Burchick, who is an artist and academic. And we talked about his work with religion and the phenomenon and AI, and about Marian apparitions and rose petals. And it touches on some of this stuff, and it's such a beautiful talk, and you can imagine the heaven that I was in during that conversation. And that is coming soon. If you'd like to support my work, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Robin Lassiter, or you can just rate and review this podcast. If you'd like to learn more or book a one-on-one session with me, please visit honeyheart.org.